I'd like to start my presentation this afternoon with a story. A group of us, students, professor, and a guide, are standing on a narrow street in a city known as Venta to the Romans. Except for said guide, we are all Americans abroad, and to us, the city now known as Winchester, United Kingdom, is ancient indeed. We are not, however, acting like stereotypical Americans abroad. We are neither drinking nor shouting. We are not demanding more ice in our drinks, and we have not been complaining loudly that the topiary was better in Disney World. Instead, we are standing quietly. The air is still. We are off the main streets. There is no sound except for the words of the guide, who is describing the final moments of a woman who died in the small house across the street from where we are standing, perhaps in the very room on the second floor whose lace-curtained window we can see. The guide stops talking. Many of us have tears in our eyes. Another of our company, a young man still in his teens, finally breaks the silence. Dude, this is intense. It was at that moment that I believe I fully realized the impact across time and space that one individual may have, one extraordinary individual, whose 18th century life reverberates into the 21st. Jane Austen died in 1817. One of her novels, Pride and Prejudice, you may know has one of the most famous opening lines in all of American and British literature. It's also been in print continuously for 201 years. She wrote, however, only 6 completed novels, and she died young at 42. I'm a terrible person when I say that it's kind of a shame that her mom and her sister both lived in their 80s, but she died at 42. Oops. In many ways, to us today, her life seems abysmally limited. Her works present the minutiae of a very particular social class. Her settings are the ballrooms, the drawing rooms, the bedrooms. Here, the site of intimate conversations between beloved siblings. There's plenty of sex in Jane Austen's novels, but it's all conducted, either discreetly or not, well off stage. The grand political events of her time, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Napoleonic Wars, make virtually no appearance. What happens in her writings are domestic events. Invitations are extended. Tea is poured. Young ladies wait to be asked to dance, and young men survey the ballrooms looking for appropriate partners. And back then, an appropriate partner was generally a young lady with money. Her works reflect her own time, to us very strictly circumscribed by her society. She traveled very little. She sewed shirts for her brothers. She helped take care of their children, and she watched sisters-in-law die in childbirth. Raised in an era when girls were not educated, she was on the one hand lucky enough to be sent off to school with her sister. However, conditions at the school were so appalling that she and her sister nearly died. They returned home with one of their little friends from the neighborhood, all 3 girls very lucky still to be alive, and actually the mother of the 3rd young girl died because she caught the illness that the girls had had. Returned home, she was able to continue her education informally via her father's library. When she died, the stone on her grave noted that she was, quote, youngest daughter of the late Reverend George Austen. Her father's name is in the same size font as her own. Although she has the honor of being the last person buried in Winchester Cathedral, that she was a novelist, already growing in stature, is not mentioned. More than 50 years later, a brass plaque was mounted near her grave that mentions her writings, but it hardly does them justice. A memorial window installed around the turn of the 20th century displays iconography that the casual visitor would be hard-pressed to identify as referring to Austen's literary career. My students, though, are not the only ones moved by her life and her stories, however modest seeming. During the past 2 decades, her literary output has spawned a veritable Jane Austen industry. Film adaptations of all 6 novels abound. Whether they are film and book very closely related, really book to film adaptations, or shall we say a little more creative? You will, I'm sure, be happy to know that 2015 will see the advent of Pride and Prejudice and zombies. Two of the world's best mystery writers, P.D. James and Reginald Hill, have both penned novels that are based on characters created by Jane Austen. Jane Austen has very recently bumped Charles Darwin, sorry Charles, wherever you are, off the British 10-pound note. And she is the only woman other than, of course, the Queen, currently on British currency. A perfectly justifiable question to ask is, how many more versions of Emma does the world need? Now, to what may we attribute this ongoing fascination? First, Austen is a very keen observer of human nature. The people that she identifies as fools, we recognize very readily today. The venues for bad behavior may have changed, but the bad behaviors continue. Put more positively, the values that Austen affirms resonate with 21st century readers. Miss Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy in Pride and Prejudice both exhibit integrity admired as much today as then. In Persuasion, Anne Elliot's maturity and incredible self-awareness are no less engaging now than they were when Austen created the character. One of Ursuline College's core learning outcomes is, quote, to make decisions based on values. And situations abound in her novels with characters who do just that. Interestingly, while our college emphasizes putting your positive values into action, in Austen's novels, characters very often make decisions based on dubious values indeed. One can, for example, offer Miss Lucy Steele in Sense and Sensibility as a consummate example of basing her decisions on her value system. Unfortunately, that system is focused exclusively on the economic well-being of Miss Steele herself, to the exclusion of any altruistic motive whatsoever. In presenting Miss Steele, Austen instructs indirectly, affirming the positive value of generosity by showing us its opposite, greed and self-interest, presenting the foibles and warts of human nature for comic effect, something that contemporary readers can enjoy as much as did their 19th century counterparts. Austen is, after all, a writer of comedies, as students find somewhat to their surprise, since she's a classic novelist, and anything classic could not possibly be comic. The humor that they find, though, is yet another reason for her ongoing popularity. Any man who wants a primer on how not to propose marriage has only to read Pride and Prejudice for not one, but two hilarious examples of what not to say, not then and not now. Austen does not, though, work only through indirection or ironic and comic means. The positive values that she upholds are those that reach through the centuries. Her own society at the time that she is writing is moving toward the idea of a meritocracy from aristocracy. And those Austen characters with merit share the same values: charity, compassion, generosity, integrity, loyalty. Miss Fanny Price in Mansfield Park may be off-putting to modern readers in many ways, but she resists marrying a very wealthy man whom she does not love, despite the considerable pressure placed upon her by the man on whose benevolence she depends for a living. No small feat, and as admirable now as it was then. In all cases, Austen's heroines and heroes have a lot to learn about themselves, and it is this process of self-discovery that is, I believe, yet another reason for her popularity. Austen's heroines change in the course of the novels. In particular, they become more aware of their own shortcomings, and we can relate. Which of us has not had the sad experience of having some image of ourselves, not at all the image that others have of us, or that one of our cherished notions or judgments must finally yield to undeniable evidence of its falsehood? The Austen characters who learn the most about themselves and who consequently are most altered by novel's end are in fact the most admirable. The aforementioned Miss Lucy Steele never changes, but Miss Elizabeth Dashwood in the same novel adds, shall we say, a dash of sensibility to her already considerable sense. And Austen's readers received the message time and again that self-reflection, in addition to self-awareness, is an important part of fully realizing one's potential. I think my students recognize and appreciate that truth. Students also appreciate Austen from another angle. They are amazed and intrigued by the social limitations on both women and men during her time. In particular, they are aghast at how few freedoms women had, even the privileged women about whom Austen writes. The idea of having no legal identity and no right to inherit, still a custom, if not strictly law in Austen's lifetime, causes them to think about everything that they take for granted today. They marvel at how little agency women had then and at how stratified the society was. And yet, these major differences are mitigated by Austen's command of the human condition, specifically in the social realm. As contemporary adaptations, such as Bridget Jones's Diary, reveal, the impulse to companionship, love, sex, marriage remains a prime motivator for all of us. Criticism of Austen's complicity in the marriage plot, every one of her heroines does indeed marry by the end of the story, overlooked that fact. People continue to look for the perfect partner, and people continue to marry even if they don't find that person. Jane Austen's Guide to Dating, published only a couple of months ago, is only the most recent book that uses Austen's novels as inspiration for modern advice on hooking up. I began this talk with a story, and I will end with a second one. Several years ago, one of my students was married to a former NFL player, and he thought the idea that his wife was taking an entire college course based on the novels of Jane Austen was pretty hilarious. In his mind, this was the girliest of all girly courses. Well, one afternoon, my student was watching one of the very fine film adaptations of recent years, and he walked into the room and he looked at the screen for a second or two, and he walked out, and then a few minutes later he walked back in and he looked at the screen, and he looked at the screen a little bit longer, and he walked out, and then I think you can see where this is going. By the third time, he came in defeated, sat down, and asked his wife to please rewind because he didn't want to miss a single second. I can think of no greater tribute to Ms. Jane Austen. Thank you so much.